Music is hard. You've got to practice, you've got to write, you've got to produce, you've got to promote and market, you've probably got to work a job on top of that because the streaming economy is a joke and there's basically no money left in the industry. You've got to jump on all the latest TikTok trends and then probably also start a YouTube channel too, because that's what being a musician is anymore, apparently. But somewhere along the way, you've also got to get really damn good at being a musician. And that's really hard because, let's be real, nobody's got time for that shit. Being someone who went from just doing this stuff on the side for fun to someone who actually does it full-time and pays their bills with it, when it comes to music, I have learned a lot and failed at a whole lot more. And over the years, that's taught me a lot about what makes me most effective at actually getting music done. And in this video, I wanted to just dissect some of these habits that I've developed, or maybe more accurately stolen from other artists, that I think will make you really good at being a very lazy musician. If there's one universal truth we all know and love, it's that it's really easy to sit in front of your DAW for 18 hours a day making beats or whatever, but it's really hard to make good ones. Good ideas are inspired ideas, and I don't know about you, but for me personally, inspiration doesn't generally come in the form of staring at my computer looking at the 8th new plugin I bought that week that I convinced myself would help me to make better music while listening to the track I made that sounds exactly the same as the last 30 tracks I wrote. There's a pretty delicate balance that you just need to learn to maintain between consuming and creating. If you do too much of one, the other just inevitably suffers. If writing our best music comes from writing what we know and writing what we connect with most, then we're probably gonna have a really hard time coming to a session actually inspired when all we've done is sit there doing the same thing we always do, waiting for something new to happen. I think the real purpose of this idea is limiting your time to write more intentionally. And that way, when you do sit down to work on something, not only are you gonna be more inspired and ready to work since you've been waiting to put down that idea, but you're going to be more intentional with what you do during the time you do have to make things. You know, it really wouldn't be a YouTube video by some pretentious millennial dipshit with a fancy camera without a line like this, but modern humans have existed for something like 300,000 years, and if you think during your lifetime you've had a truly unique or different experience, well, boy do I have some news for you. In pretty much all creative work, every good idea has probably already been done in some way or another about 1,000 times over. And in music, every chord progression and melody and idea realistically is probably already out there in some form. And the totally crazy part is, that's completely fine. Bands like Led Zeppelin made an entire career out of just doing other people's shit a little bit differently. Techno has its roots in Motown and disco, and the best thing you can ultimately expect yourself to do is just make something from the parts of whatever you find interesting. And because only you will ever come up with that specific combination of things, while it might not be anything profound or unique or even anything all that new, it doesn't really matter because it was made up of your choices, and just learning to develop that sense of self-confidence in those choices as an artist is everything. To quote my grandpa in his infinite wisdom, knowing how to fix an engine doesn't actually make the damn thing work. Since internet forums and subreddits and discords took off, and I guess after the first wave of production YouTube hit especially, there's been this shift towards this worship and almost fetishization of methodology and the process without almost any emphasis being placed on the actual musical implementation of knowing or doing any of these things. The great Charlie Parker once said, "You've got to learn your instrument. Then you practice, practice, practice. And then, when you finally get up there on the bandstand, forget all that and just wail." As I'm sure those of you who are older or more experienced musicians in the comments can probably attest to, there's a pretty severe point of diminishing returns when it comes to just practice. After a certain point, running scales and doing exercises and practicing balancing your faders to get things to sound right in a mix and all that just stops being useful, because doing that isn't actually making any music. As I have said many times in the past, and as I'm sure I will say many more times in the future, sitting around all day watching every dickhead on YouTube masquerading as an actual musician behind a fancy camera and nice color grading tell you how to make music won't actually ever make your music for you. It's almost comical how easy it is to sit in your studio for days on end adding endless tweaks to your tracks. You can layer, you can re-record, you can quantize, you can tune, you can spectral sidechain, and you can do just about anything your little heart desires about 1,000,000 times over. At this point in home recording technology, we have near infinite tools to fix the near infinite problems we like to create to tell ourselves that we could do something just a little bit better before we have to sit down and actually just decide to fucking finish it. One universal truth in music is that production can't save a shitty song, and great music always outshines the merit of production quality. I think this has been proven time and time again throughout the history of recorded music, from the eras of Motown and early electronic music through to even more contemporary artists who emphasize the idea of a good foundation instead of just relentless polish. As much as we're probably all sick of hearing about Rick Rubin and hearing quotes from Rick Rubin ever since that goddamn book came out, I think he has one quote in particular that I think is essential for artists today, maybe more than ever, to really start to embody when it comes to the idea of just letting the music speak for itself. He said, "There's a tremendous amount of power in using the least amount of information to get a point across." Personally, I've found that mixing using more old school techniques like channel strips and such, and only a few sends in a session, has made me a significantly better writer, because I'm not able to rely on anything that's inauthentic to what was recorded in order to fix things. Any production I'm doing is simply there to clean things up or just enhance what's already there. Vance Powell has also talked about his own method of production where the rough mix of a track should be with the faders at unity gain. I think this idea is actually pretty powerful, and I've sort of augmented this idea into my own version of it, where the rough mix of a song can only be done with the faders and panning. Anything beyond that is no-go, and this really emphasizes the idea that everything in a track and in an arrangement and everything should be there for a reason and contribute something. And this makes you pretty brutal with the editing and arranging process, but I think it forces you to go down and clear things up and make it as good as possible from the foundation, so that when you do get into the more producery stages, all you're doing is just kind of shining things up a bit and not trying to fix anything. This is, at least in my mind, the most effective way to create the highest possible form of your own work musically. Outside of any production tools used for more of a creative effect, which I guess I would consider to be part of the songwriting process really, you have to simply create an idea that works on its own without augmentation. Similar to overproducing things, it's also easy to over-edit and rely way too much on augmenting the process of actually just playing something in live. There are countless discussions and books and YouTube videos and quotes and articles and whatever about the merits of humanity in music. There's something so distinctly interesting and beautiful about the artifacts of human performance, whether that's a musician playing their instrument instead of a sampled version of that instrument being used, or the way a beat maker flips a sample and then starts playing the drums in live on some drum pads on an MPC or something instead of just clicking together some MIDI in a DAW. And there's something in that that we're just innately drawn to. Especially in the world of digital recording, we have effectively unlimited do-overs, unlimited ways to correct things, and instant access to punching in and nailing things down 4 bars at a time. This can be useful to sometimes save a take that's almost there with a couple minor flubs, or to spot in an idea that somehow adds something new, but it's easy to have it become a little bit of a deal with the devil. Now, there's certainly a time and a place for this kind of stuff, and I suppose there is also an aesthetic consideration and argument to be made about the use of things that are overshined and perfected, and sometimes that's useful, especially in contrast to more organic elements. As stupid as it sounds, sometimes it is really easy to get lost in the land of infinite do-overs, because for a lot of us, we're working out of home studios and such where no one's really witness to the fact that we're only doing things 4 bars at a time. And it's pretty easy to forget that sometimes the most effective way to do something is just to play it in live in one go, and you'll be a better musician for it because, well, you have to actually play what you wrote. You know, if there is one thing I've learned so far in my 30 years of successfully not imploding from existential dread, it's that in life there is a difference between lazy and efficient. However, it's often not all that far between those 2 points. So with that, maybe it's time for me to remind you to get the fuck off of YouTube and go do that music stuff you've been working on, and why not finish it the lazy way, like the degenerate, half-assed musician we all know you are deep down inside? Because, I mean, hey, at least then you'll have something to show for it.